Good morning, Primary 5. Today we'll talk about Lesson 1 of Unit 3, which is about food relationships among living organisms. Okay, at the first, let us know some new scientific expressions. Like the first one is autotrophs. What is the meaning of autotrophic organisms? Autotrophic organisms are self-feeders, make their own food by photosynthesis process like plants and algae. So, if I tell you why plants are autotrophic organisms, you will answer that plants make their own food by photosynthesis process, which are self-feeders. Okay? The second expression is heterotroph. And heterotrophic organisms are organisms that depend on other organisms for food, like herbivorous, which eats plants, carnivorous, which eats meat only, and the third one is omnivorous. And omnivorous, like us humans, which eat both plants and meat together. The third type of living organism, decomposers, and decomposers depend on breaking down and absorbing nutrients from dead and decaying organisms, like mushrooms and bacteria. Okay, now we have three types of organisms. The first one is autotroph, the second one heterotroph, and the third one is decomposer. And each one of them differ from the other as a feeding way. Okay, now we will talk about types of feeding relationship between living organisms. And food relationships classified into three classes. The first one, predation, second one, symbiosis, the third one is saprophytism. Now we will identify each one of those relationships. Let's talk about predation. Predation is a temporary food relationship between two living organisms. One of them called devour the other. Again, predation is a temporary relationship. Why? Because the predation ends by devouring the prey or part of it. As soon as the lion devours the deer and it fill up, the predation process ends up. So, predation is a temporary food relationship between two living organisms. One of them devours the other, and the organism which devours called predator, like lion, fox, snake, and so on. And the prey is the organism which devours by the other organism, like the deer, rabbit, mouse, and so on. Predation in plants. Predation in plants is less common than in animal world. Okay, the plants that depend on predation is less than animals that depend on predation. Okay, commonly plants make carbohydrates in the photosynthesis process, and to make protein they have to absorb compounds like nitrogen from soil. What if a plant can't absorb nitrogen from soil? These plants called insectivorous or insect eater because they can't absorb protein compounds from soil like nitrogen. So they depend on devouring the insects to get their own protein. Again, there are some plants that can't absorb nitrogen from the soil. So, to make protein, they have to devour insects. For that, those plants called insectivorous or insect eaters. That's what the predation and some organisms have ways to self-defense against predation to protect themselves. From those ways are the camouflage and mimicry. Let's talk about camouflage. Camouflage is changing the color of the living organism to simulate the colors of the surrounding environment to hide from its enemies. Again, in camouflage, the living organism changes its color to stimulate the color of the surrounding environment, like chameleon, butterflies, frogs, and so on. And the other way of self-defense is mimicry. And mimicry is a phenomenon in which the harmless living organism imitate other harmful living organisms to escape from enemy, like some bees that imitate wasps to protect themselves from enemies and escape. Okay? In camouflage, the living organism change its color to stimulate the environment, and in mimicry, the living organism, which is harmless, imitate other harmful organisms to escape from enemies. That was all about predation and self-defense. The second type of food relationship is symbiosis. And symbiosis is permanent relationship between two different organisms and have three major types, like mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Let's talk about mutualism. Mutualism is a food relationship in which the living organisms, both are living organisms in the relationship, get benefit from each other. Again, mutualism is a food relationship between two living organisms in which both of them get benefit from each other. Like the relationship between nodular bacteria and leguminous plant. Before, we said that there are types of plants like leguminous plants, like peas, bean, and so on. These leguminous plants depend on a type of bacteria called nodular bacteria. These bacteria absorb the nitrogen from soil and give it or fix it on the roots of leguminous plant. So the leguminous plant absorb this nitrogen to build up the protein, and the nodular bacteria take the sugar or starch from leguminous plant to eat. So in this relationship, both of the living organisms get benefit. So it is a mutualism relationship. The second type of symbiosis is commensalism, and commensalism is a food relationship in which one organism benefits and the other is not affected. One get benefit and the other not benefit and not harmed. Like the relation between sponge and tiny aquatic living organisms which live in the sponge. So the tiny aquatic living organism found their shelter and the sponge doesn't affect it, doesn't get harmed nor benefit. Okay, the third type of symbiosis now is parasitism. What is parasitism? Is a food relationship in which one organism benefits, which is called parasite, and the other harmed, which is called host. So the parasitism has two living organisms. One is parasite, get benefit, and the second is host, get harmed. Parasitism has two types. The first one is external, and from the name, at external parasitism, the parasite lives externally on the host's body. And the second type is internal parasitism, and this type, the parasite lives inside the host's body. The external parasitism have different examples like lice, bugs, jawless lamprey, fleas. And the internal parasitism have examples like tapeworm, filaria, bilharzia, scareworm. The third and last type of food relationships is saprophytism. And saprophytism is a food relationship in which saprophyte, which is a decomposer organism, gets its food by decomposing food remains or bodies of dead organisms.